Welcome to this new video where we're going to talk a little bit about current events. So today, no news about Forza Horizon 6, but some updates regarding Test Drive Solar Crown, and unfortunately, they're not really good news. Believe me, it doesn't really make me happy to talk about this in a video because Test Drive is one of my favorite franchises. It's really a series that I particularly appreciate. It's the first franchise that introduced me to open-world racing games. And despite all the shitstorms that Test Drive Solar Crown, the latest one released in 2024, has faced, sometimes deserved, sometimes not deserved. In any case, I've always supported the game. I've always enjoyed playing TDEU, talked about new updates and new seasons whenever there were things that interested me and came out for the game. So talking about bad news that could actually call into question the very existence of the Test Drive franchise, believe me, it kind of pisses me off. But still, it's news that needs to be talked about because it's pretty important. And right now, we don't really know what's going to happen to us, the players. So this news is actually a follow-up to something I started sharing in a video a few weeks ago. Kilotone Racing, the studio developing Test Drive Solar Crown, belongs to a bigger company called Nacon, which itself belongs to an even bigger company called Big Ben. And this big company, Big Ben, has been in serious financial trouble since the beginning of the year. So I'll quickly sum up the situation for you. It had large debts, and to pay off part of these debts, it was supposed to take out a kind of loan, which at the last moment was refused by the banks that were supposed to grant it. So Big Ben couldn't pay back the debts it was supposed to, and it suddenly found itself forced to adapt its financial strategy overnight. Now it's trying to cut costs no matter what, meaning it's closing or selling off various parts of its business. Nacon is one of its most severely affected businesses, and Kilotone Racing, which belongs to Nacon, is directly suffering the consequences. In fact, what we've just learned is that the Kilotone Racing studio, which until now had been somewhat spared by this whole crisis, is going to see its workforce reduced by 70%. Of the people who work at the studio, developers, people who handle communications, basically everyone who works there on all the different Kilotone Racing games will simply no longer be working there. That means that after this, there will be about 40 to 45 people left at Kilotone Racing. And it's pretty hard to see how these 40 people could manage to do the work of the 120 people who have been working there up until now. And at the same time, they could also handle updates for Test Drive Solar Crown, and also develop new games like Endurance Motorsport series. The thing is, for now, we don't really know what impact this will have on the development of current games and future games. Apparently, Endurance Motorsport series is more or less safe. Because the timing was incredible since that's when the news broke. There was also a Nacon conference, where new information was given about Endurance Motorsport series, which still doesn't have a release date. But after the conference, it was explained that normally the game is set to release in summer 2026. So, in principle, this one should come out. It shouldn't be cancelled due to financial problems. And if it's a commercial success, maybe it will give a little boost to Kilotone Racing, to Nacon. On the other hand, WRC, which had been taken over by Nacon and Kilotone Racing after being owned for a few years by Electronic Arts, was eventually handed over to another studio. So, it's the same thing. We learned yesterday that it's not Kilotone Racing that's going to develop WRC, but actually another studio owned by Nacon called Grid Games. And I don't want to say anything wrong, but I think this is one of the first games that this studio will be working on. And for Test Drive Solar Crown, we don't really know how that's going to turn out either, because the update schedules that the developers had given so far for Seasons 7, 8, and 9 were still very impressive. Season 7 is expected to completely revamp the multiplayer experience, introducing a central hub for matchmaking that should help you find races faster than before. Season 8 was mainly expected to add houses, which Solar Crown has been missing from the start if it's going to be seen as a true old-school TDU. Developing this feature is very challenging, because here, we're really talking about a system where you can buy your houses and truly decorate them from A to Z. Inside, it's a pretty big deal that should come out at best, if I'm not mistaken. It's not happening until early 2027, and unfortunately, even though I think it's going to be really appreciated by the core TDU players, I'm not 100% sure it will succeed in convincing new players to come to Solar Crown, especially now that Horizon 6 is coming out. It's a good feature, it's a good idea, but personally, I think it's coming a little bit late. So if anyone from Kilotone happens to see this video and wants to explain a little bit in the comments about what's going to happen with this franchise, don't hesitate. Because it's true that from the player's point of view, what we see or what we can imagine is that there's actually a good part of Kilotone Racing currently working on Endurance Motorsport series to finish development to meet the summer 2026 deadline to release the game. But after that, it's hard to imagine how a team that has lost 2/3 of its developers could manage to stick to the schedule. Updates for TDU, which were made when the studio was really much bigger. Even though it's entirely possible that out of the 120 people who were working there until now, A large part of the studio was already working more on Endurance Motorsport series and not on TDU updates. On my end, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that TDU will still get updates, that the game will survive this whole crisis, and that the franchise won't be completely forgotten, because it's hard to see who else, which other publisher, would want to revive it in the coming years. The worst-case scenario would be if Nacon decides to shut down the entire studio in a few months. That's what they did with Spider's Game Studio, which had been around nearly 20 years and made successful games like the Gridfall series. Spiders, but no one really showed any interest. Let's hope the same fate doesn't happen to Kiloton. Let's hope that Nacon will continue to see potential in Kiloton's games, and that if they ever decide to sell the studio, someone will show interest, especially since, and this is really where I wanted to get with this video, Test Drive Solar Crown. Currently, let's remember that it's still a game that doesn't have a single-player mode, doesn't have an offline mode, which means that to play Test Drive Solar Crown, you have to have an internet connection. Also, the game needs its own servers for players to connect. Without them, the game is essentially dead. And you can imagine that if Nacon shuts down Kiloton Racing, the game's servers will be shut down at the same time, and the game will simply no longer be accessible. Well, at least in the current state of things, because let's remember that since the Crew 1 situation, remember, Ubisoft shut down the servers for the Crew 1, we were in the same situation, so the game was no longer accessible. There is a law at the European level that is currently being voted on, following the Stop Killing Games petition, which was launched right after the shutdown of the Crew 1. The verdict should normally be known in July 2026, which is when we'll find out if the European Union is forcing video game studios that sell games to ensure access to their games, even if the servers are shut down. If that happens, Test Drive Solar Crown's developers would basically need to add an offline mode for TDU. They were already considering it. Remember, during the very first conferences for TDU Solar Crown, in 2024 and 2023, right when there was all that shitstorm about the Crew 1, the devs explained that, indeed, they were already planning back then how TDU Solar Crown could continue to be played if there were no more servers. So, there's probably an offline version that's already been in the works for quite some time. We'll see how it turns out. What's still sad about this whole story, because I know that TDU fans can get pretty angry. There are people who don't like TDU for good reasons, but there are also people who don't like TDU for bad reasons. If you're on that team, you might be thinking that it's what the TDU devs deserve, and that it's probably because their game didn't sell well. No, that's not the case. Actually, TDU Solar is a game that sold pretty well. It's unclear how many units the game sold, but it's several 100,000, possibly near 1 million. However, we still don't know if it's highly profitable. What we do know is that selling between 300,000 and 1 million copies is far from a commercial flop. So, what's sad is that even now, we don't really know how things will turn out in the long run. If the future of TDU is ever called into question, it's clearly not their fault. It's really due to a financial and administrative management error by their parent company. So, we'll see. You can count on me to keep you updated on the news about this topic, whether things go in the right direction or the wrong direction. In the meantime, yesterday, there was still an update released for Crown, the mid-season update for Season 6. Despite the bad news, the game is still active and the devs are working on it, so keep an eye on it. Subscribe to my YouTube channel for future videos, and leave a like to support me. It means a lot. And also, I'll put the link to my Twitch channel in a pinned comment under this video if you want to come chat a bit about gaming news with me. Don't hesitate to come back tomorrow for the next video. See you.